What is up, y'all? It's your boy Anki coming at you with the My Hero Academia Chapter 332 review. Hope you've been doing well. This is the third video I'm recording today. Church of MHA was popping off today. You know we got it coming back next week. I'm excited. We pick up where we left off with a flashback. We get to see Star and Stripe back in the day training with the boys, aka her bros. And she's kind of talking about how there's always been an upper limit on her quirk, but then also how some people would try to qualify, you know, her quirk power and her limits based on the fact that she was a girl, or, you know, just little stuff like that. Or at the end of the day, quirks reflect what's on the inside, so they basically downplaying who she is as a person, and that's why she can't make herself as good as All Might. Just these little things. And then she says, like, you know, they're like, that has nothing to do with it. And, like, you know, the guy that we keep seeing, like the eye that we keep zeroing in on, that someone for some reason tried to insinuate was potentially Hisashi Midoriya. Very blatantly seems to be a black man. He's just like, you know, no, that's your quirk, girl. And we got your back. That's what we're for. We're supposed to be bros. And if anything, you're still the closest to All Might out here. And so this idea that she's always had these pilots with her, that like basically like she was going in the Air Force, they're doing all this training, working together. It's always been that way. Just goes to show that this was not just her going off on a mission, but these are a group of people who have always been together, riding out to go do something that they believe in. And then we see that, like, Tiamat, we get the view of the Tiamat missiles coming in while the laser beam is still up. And so they're coordinating, talking about how she's got to undo the laser rule. And Shigaraki starts, you know, we start getting the perspective of Shigaraki, who's like, she has to know this isn't doing a lot, it's just kind of cooking me. She's has to be going for a big attack, something strong enough to vaporize him, something that won't just let him, you know, keep living. And so they make it a point to focus in on the hyper region. They call it a shitty game of hot potato. But as she's waiting for it, you see the missile. She gets her giant air stand in position, and the missiles all hit the hand like it's got like a membrane to it, and immediately pulls the giant forward. And Star jumps forward too to keep up with it so that she can keep pace and actually grab it. The explosion around it is kind of like it dropping below Mach, because if you go above the speed of sound or you drop below it after being above it, you still get the boom either way. And so that's like partially them slowing down as she catches all of them with the stand, as she goes and taps them all and applies the new rule of Tiamat is redirected. And as long as the rule applies to even a single missile, you know, she's able to make that rule for all of them. And then she guides the missiles through and does the state-of-the-art hypersonic intercontinental cruise punch. Now, based on the fact that Horikoshi is pretty consistent in details, I think this is to show us that these, while they are ICBMs, they are not nuclear weapons. So we don't have to worry about the radiation fallout that we had discussed in previous reviews and on streams. But we do know that these missiles still were extensively powerful. And we had seen a black figure shooting up, and where it was drawn, where you could easily think it was Shigaraki recovering from being cooked. And you can see the explosion from the mainland of Japan. Endeavor and them can see it while they're still driving on the expressway, so they know which direction they need to go. So there's a possibility of Endeavor doing his best to rush out to sea and try to find out what's going on there. The explosion's pretty huge. And then we see that there is this massive crater, and we immediately zero in on this hole, and then all of a sudden Shigaraki comes up out of the hole. Eyes barely functioning, skin burned off worse than the time Endeavor does it, ribs poking out, left arm missing, just tons of damage. Oh man, is that a League of Legends reference? No. And then, you know, we get like him talking about his power, controlling what Decay does, knew that she was preparing something big, and knowing that if he tried to run away and hide before she was doing the big move, that it would be too easy for her to catch on and maybe, you know, catch him. So he immediately drops into the hole while being lasered once it's slightly alleviated, and used the Nomu as a decoy. So Bat Nomu was gone. Should have seen that coming because my boy Coyote loved the Bat Nomu, and as we've discussed throughout the history of this channel, for those of you who are long viewers, any character that Coyote gets attached to has a death flag. And it happened with Crust, happened with a lot of the Nomu, and here we are with this too. So, Bat Nomu seems to be gone for the count, and then when they're like back in the formation, they give her a place to stand. They wanted to get into a position where they could help her out. And Shigaraki even says, like, you know, you could have beaten anybody but me. Anybody who doesn't have this level of regeneration is going down here. And he says that while he's still reforming hair, reforming his face muscles, reforming skin, as he's trying to, like, jump up there. And when he says burst, it seems like the Bat Nomu still had that ability that we saw from the Hosu City incident Nomu, with the ability to absorb the attacks and then redistribute them while still taking that damage. So you see a bunch of the lasers coming out and going everywhere, and then Shigaraki hopping across the tops of the planes, and he says, I can make better use of your resources, as a means to say that, like, I like these planes, I'm hopping from plane to plane without needing them to get into formation for me. I utilize their lasers to create a bigger distraction, which was more effective than the damage you tried to do to me with your lasers. And then we get this whole part where the pilot is like, no, Sakatu is star, because after all that damage, my crap going boom should blow him to bits. So the guy who told her back in the day, you know, not to worry about that stuff, that they would still be there, is like, I will die for you right here. Smash my plane and kill Shigaraki. This should do it. And Shigaraki, and she can't, actually. As much as she talked about, I'll bring your bodies home, as much as she talked about all this other stuff, she couldn't go through with it. And what I find fascinating is that she doesn't look like she was back in the, like, Western Horikoshi style. It looks like she might have reactivated that rule on herself, or at the very least used one or two rules on herself to try to deal with the circumstances. I don't know for sure. We see that, you know, Shigaraki's got that palm on her hand, on her face. Whether it's him decaying her, stealing the quirk, we know that nothing good can come of this particular situation for Star. This is basically the checkmate. The only way that this doesn't immediately result in her getting decayed is if the pilot himself makes it a point to fire another laser so that they get split apart, which is totally possible. Endeavor is a hypersonic character. He could be immediately doing his best to fly out to the ocean and could maybe, like, try to do his best to knock Shigaraki away and then fly off, which would lead to Shigaraki having to swim back. There's some potential for where we can go with this, but this chapter was more focused around, like, the actual combat, understanding the mechanics of the quirks. The yield was definitely impressive. We see that there was, like, a massive crater besides just the hole that was created by doing all this. We don't know what the mainland Japan is going to think, but I will say that the substantial amounts of damage and the way that this fight was handled does lead more into that, as we talked about, that imbuing with divinity. Ian was on stream and he, you know, was like, okay, how is this going to build into that, like, that political agenda that we've talked about? And the reality is that with this being an invasion to, like, another nation, even with it being in international waters, it's still technically, you know, going off without permission from the UN to go and fight and attempt to kill somebody in another country. You know, she still technically did all of that unlicensed, fired missions. Like, they warned Japan, yeah, we're sending missiles, but, like, that was after she had already gone off without the approval, and they even stated this was going to cost more than her license. So you've got the narrative, the lack of government approval, the ability to paint the heroes as these reckless people who are not only in Japan selfish, but even in, you know, the US, so the home of heroes. Specifically being able to slander the home of heroes, where hero culture really took off and became a big thing that led to hero society permeating so much of all these other nations. Being able to be like, see, they just overuse their power, they abuse that power, factoring into what Shigaraki said back at the USJ when he was like, these are government sponsored weapons of violence. for her to come over and spread this much destruction, even if it was with the best of intentions, there's still that political spin. There's still that idea that people who are already downtrodden, people who are already in those minority groups, like the mutants are already rallying behind Spinner and seeing him as like the savior, another path forward because of the bad things that have already happened. It's not unbelievable or inconceivable that these people would further adopt these ideologies. Furthermore, people who live in Japan who were maybe on the fence could easily be swayed over to the Shigaraki side, because at the end of the day, he's got the power to make the reality how he wants it. And I don't just mean with the concept of him taking New Order, I just mean he's officially that powerful. He's survived some things that nobody else in this world are expected to be able to live through. And that's going to get him seen as something far beyond what anybody else has expected. And with the introduction of this international hero, we're definitely going to have ramifications across the nation. The nations, not only because of All For One and the organized crime and other nations and those people wilding out or doing bad things, but now you'll have people, mutants especially, people who are heteromorphic types who already identify with these causes, effectively seeing one man stand up to the home of heroes, the United States of America, the government, standing up to government bodies, taking on Japanese government, taking on the number one hero from the US, this symbol of terror and fear to those who are, perfectly fine with the status quo. Shigaraki has become it. On the flip side, as a beacon of hope to those who have felt oppressed and jaded, marginalized, and neglected by the society that we have within this narrative, they will see him as that beacon of light. They will see him as the savior, the same way that Reed Destro crooned and yelled and screamed and was overjoyed at the idea of Shigaraki taking over the Metal Liberation Army, at the idea of incorporating Shigaraki and his power into their group, over the idea of him representing what it truly means to be liberated and live in a quirk-based society, one where the people who use their quirks freely and live properly are the ones who get explored. And it's worth noting that Deku and Shigaraki shared that colored cover page a while back where they were both holding the TVs, and now it seems like we got Deku spending this arc pursuing and chasing after the after image of All For One through his goons and all these other things, and now we have this story beat where Shigaraki is chasing the after image of All Might, the TV that he held, where he's dealing with Cassie, somebody who has adored All Might since she was a child, very much who's been reaching his expectations and what he could do, and then taking that and finally removing one example of All Might from the world in this 1v10 battle. It marks a significant step in his progression, but it also assures us that Melvin here, as we've taken to calling Shigaraki and All For One's fusion, is almost certainly certified here. And with the way that his intellect is still processing things, it's seeming more and more like Melvin is dominated by Shigaraki and less by All For One, even though All For One does occasionally pop in through the usage of the pronouns. Now, one of the things that I want to say is that assuming Shigaraki is going to assuming that this Melvin is going to consume the New Order quirk, then I think the best usage of New Order is for the Tomura Shigaraki personality or aspects of that personality to make it a point to cast a rule upon the All For One, Vestige for One that is inside of his body so that he can be the dominant player. And with that would then give him the ability to go on and try to potentially reassert himself, taking out the original All For One, possibly taking all of his quirks too, just for the extra power and going about his day. I still think that the fact that Spinner is, quote, guarding All For One is rather suspicious and should have a major payoff, likely in the form of Spinner making it a point to betray All For One to cause his downfall, to make sure that Shigaraki and not All For One sits upon that throne. If we have New Order to keep that part of him sealed away, then we can also have the physical body of All For One dead, and then you just kind of have this fight against the quirk that's this gestalt of power. But we're gonna see. Since this is mostly an action chapter, even with the flashbacks of Star and Stripe giving a chance to humanize her. It does also kind of heavily suggest that she's on the chopping block, at the very least on the incapacitation list for likely the remainder of the series, or at least the next couple of chapters. I don't see this ending well for her. I could see the rest of these pilots potentially getting away, but it's going to come down to, again, if like New Order is taken and that Nomu is actually dead, then maybe Shigaraki is like, New Order, boom, Tomura Shigaraki is in control, New Order, I now have the ability to fly, and he just flies away. There's a lot of ways that this can be handled, and it's, I don't know if he'd actually make it a point to leave those guys alive, but they're all driving hypersonic jets, so they may be able to get out, but I don't think they'd leave without at least being able to secure Star's body or corpse unless she is completely decayed away. So, I know some of you were hoping that Star would get to stick around and be one of the major players. I even consider the possibility of her being a new teacher for Deku, but ultimately we need Shigaraki, and we need, all for one, we need Melvin here to be able to establish himself as an actual villain and threat, and he can't just sit around racking up losses and it's like, well, yeah, he's still really powerful, but he got stuck dealing with like 20 people, so of course he lost. The character deserves his own victories and his own story, and it's always been the case where Horikoshi's been maintaining everybody having their own story that follows their own ambitions, and this is no different. So let me know what you guys think. You already know we'll be back next week with that Church of MHA. Leave them comments down below. Let me know what you are thinking, what you're expecting, what you're hoping for going into forward. We got some One Piece and JJK content, chapter reviews already recorded. Gonna try to release these out throughout the week, and hopefully you guys enjoy the content I'm making. Hope to see you guys all Sunday. I'm Aniki, and I am out.